My parents left me to raise my schizophrenic sister alone. Then they called me a monster when I got her help. When I told them she was in a mental institution, my mom screamed, "What kind of sister are you?" I hung up. That was 3 years ago. Today, the nurse who mistreated her had justice given to him, while my parents sat in the back, crying into each other's shoulders. I didn't look at them once. My sister was 23 when she was first diagnosed with schizophrenia. Honestly, it wasn't even a surprise. Growing up, I'd constantly hear her whispering alone in her room, but when I walked past, she'd stop mid-sentence and stare at the wall, like I'd interrupted a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Or another time, she literally went a month straight without showering, her reasoning being that there are people watching her through the pipes. And despite me being just 2 years older, my parents left her up to me, because they figured I knew what I was doing. Well, I didn't. All I knew was that I always had the responsibility to cancel plans with my friends, pass up on college, and basically stop studying, all in the name of taking care of my sister Nina. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't some bold act of selflessness. If it was up to me, then I would have just left her at home while I lived my life. But it was up to my parents, and if they ever caught me doing anything outside of Nina, they'd wail on me, yell at me for being a disappointment. So when I had finally saved up enough money for her to get diagnosed, my idiot parents were surprised. They genuinely had no idea, because by this point, they had literally found another home to live in. Meanwhile, we were stuck together in a 300-square-foot apartment, while I worked 70 hours a week at the local Chipotle just to make ends meet. It was simply too much. So I took her to a mental institution. With the help of an insurance plan, we got a pretty good deal. And even though Nina was a huge pain, I really did love her. So I made sure to sneakily interview the other patients, inspect every room, and even made sure she was happy with it before I left her there. I always visited her at least 5 times a week and brought her fresh blankets, new clothes, and her comfort items. She promised me that it was helping her get better. And that's when my parents found out about where she was. I still remember the call. "Can you put Nina on the phone?" My mom asked. I mean, I would, but she's in Whitestone Institution. There was an audible gasp over the phone. "What kind of sister are you?" But I hung up before she could continue spewing her BS. It wasn't fair. I deserved to have a life too. And from there, I did. I spent the year getting my GED and managed to get a job that was almost double the pay of Chipotle. I got time to myself and even met the LOML, Eli. And Nina seemed happier than ever. One day when I visited her, I could tell there was something different about her. Her voice was relaxed, calm. "Chloe, I know no one ever told you this, but thank you for taking care of me. I was too messed up to say it back then, but I love you. And I'll never forget everything you've done for me." My vision blurred instantly. Tears fell before I could even stop them. I took both her hands, and we both just cried. "Thank you for paying to have me here. I think I'll be able to leave in a few months." For the first time ever, her voice made the future feel possible. I assured her that it was no problem, and she could take all the time she needed. Between work and Eli, I got really busy that week. It was literally the only time I missed more than a day of catching up with her. So when I showed up a week later, I came with fluffy socks, a new journal, and an expensive new lip balm. But she didn't accept my gifts or my apology because she wasn't there. An awful gut feeling instantly washed over me. I frantically interrogated all the staff members, asking what the F had happened. They all told me the same thing. She had signed herself out. I began begging them to review surveillance of the facility exit. I even tried to seduce them, but it didn't work because it was against protocol. The following 48 hours were some of the worst of my life. I think I slept a total of 1 hour and spent all my time driving around with my boyfriend to look for Nina. I had plastered missing posters everywhere and even had a search group from Facebook help out. In fact, they were the ones to find her. She was in a local drainage ditch, unalived. Her body had torn clothing and there were bruises all over her neck. I immediately threw up on the grass in front of me. They say the first stage of grief is shock, but it's not, because all I felt in that moment was a need for revenge. I didn't say anything and asked Eli to drive me to Whitestone. He looked confused, but he knew better than to argue with me, so he did. And when I got there, I kissed him goodbye, because I admitted myself for a voluntary year-long stay. You see, I knew that if I wanted to destroy them, it had to be from the inside out. The first night at Whitestone was surreal. I was in the same building where my sister had lived her final days. The intake process was cold and mechanical. I told them I was suffering from caregiver burnout and depression after my sister's death. Not a complete lie. The nurse processing me had dead eyes and barely looked up from her clipboard. I wondered if she'd treated Nina the same way. They assigned me to the East Wing, which was different from where Nina had stayed. I requested to be placed in the West Wing instead, making up some story about east-facing windows triggering my migraines. The staff didn't care enough to argue. I needed to be where Nina had been. My roommate was a middle-aged woman named Greta, who mostly kept to herself. She had pictures of cats taped all over her side of the room. I spent that first night staring at the ceiling, planning my next moves. The room smelled like disinfectant and sadness. The next morning, I joined the other patients for breakfast. The food was exactly as bad as Nina had described, rubbery eggs and toast that could break a window. I sat alone, watching the staff. There were 3 nurses on duty, 2 orderlies, and a doctor who breezed through for about 5 minutes. I made mental notes of their names from their badges. During group therapy, I stayed quiet, just observed. A nurse named Marcy led the session, and I noticed how she cut people off when they started talking about problems with their treatment. Red flag number 1. I also noticed how some patients seemed afraid to speak at all. After lunch, I approached a skinny guy named Trevor, who'd been friendly with Nina according to what she'd told me during visits. I casually mentioned I was Nina's sister. His eyes went wide, and he quickly looked around before mumbling something about being sorry for my loss. When I pressed him about Nina's last days, he just shook his head and walked away. That night, I pretended to take my meds, but actually tucked them under my tongue and spit them out later. I needed to stay sharp. Around 2 a.m., I snuck out of my room and wandered the halls, memorizing the layout. An orderly spotted me and escorted me back, buying my story about being disoriented and looking for the bathroom. By day 3, I'd established a routine that made me look like a model patient. I attended all activities, spoke just enough in group to seem engaged but not problematic, and started making friends with other patients. I needed allies. A woman named Denise finally opened up to me during art therapy. "You're Nina's sister, aren't you?" she whispered while painting what looked like a tornado. I heard what happened. She was getting better, you know. She wasn't supposed to leave. My heart raced. "What do you mean?" Denise glanced nervously at the door. "Nina told me she was scared of one of the night nurses. A guy named Ethan. Said he'd come into her room when he wasn't supposed to." I felt sick but kept my face neutral. "Did she report him?" "She tried," Denise said, her brush trembling slightly. Nobody believed her. They said it was part of her condition. Paranoia. I spent the rest of the day watching for this Ethan person. During dinner, I spotted him. Tall, probably mid-30s, with a carefully maintained beard and a smile that never reached his eyes. He moved around the room with practiced ease, touching patients' shoulders as he passed. I noticed how some of them flinched. That night, I called Eli using the patient phone during our allowed time. I kept it vague since the calls were monitored. "Hey, I need you to look into someone for me. A nurse here named Ethan Markowitz. Can you do that without raising flags?" Eli promised he would. I hung up feeling slightly better, knowing I had help on the outside, but I was on my own in here. The next day, I deliberately positioned myself near Ethan during medication time. I watched how he interacted with female patients, the lingering hand on the wrist as he handed them water, the way he leaned in too close when speaking. When it was my turn, I played meek and vulnerable. "I'm having trouble sleeping," I told him, looking up with what I hoped were sad eyes. "I can help with that," he said, his voice soft but something predatory behind it. "Sometimes I work nights. I could check on you." I thanked him while my stomach churned. I just confirmed my first suspicion. He targeted vulnerable women. Over the next few days, I gathered more information. I befriended a janitor named Roy by helping him clean up a spill no one else would touch. He'd been working at Whitestone for 15 years and knew all the gossip. I carefully steered our conversations towards staff behavior. "Some of these nurses, they think they're gods," Roy told me while mopping. "Especially that Ethan guy. Always volunteering for night shifts with the female patients. Administration loves him, though. Never calls in sick, takes extra shifts." I asked Roy if there had been complaints about Ethan. "Couple times," he said quietly. "But nothing sticks. These patients, you know, they got problems. Easy to dismiss what they say." By the end of my first week, I had a clearer picture. Ethan worked primarily with female patients, volunteered for night shifts, and had complaints that were dismissed. I also learned he had access to the medication room and often administered sedatives during night shifts. I needed proof, but how? The facility had cameras in the hallways but not in patient rooms. Privacy laws. The irony wasn't lost on me. During my second week, I noticed Ethan paying more attention to me. He'd seek me out during free time, ask how I was adjusting. I played along, sharing fabricated stories about my troubled past, painting myself as exactly the type of victim he seemed to prefer, damaged, isolated, with few outside connections. One evening, he sat next to me in the common room. "You remind me of your sister," he said casually. "She was special too." I froze, fighting the urge to attack him right there. Instead, I asked, "You knew Nina well?" "I helped her a lot," he said, his eyes watching my reaction. "It's such a tragedy what happened after she left. If only she'd stayed where she was safe." The implication was clear. He was testing me, seeing if I suspected anything. I forced tears to my eyes. "I miss her so much. I feel so alone now." His hand found my knee, squeezing slightly. "You're not alone anymore, Chloe." As he walked away, I noticed Denise watching us from across the room. She made a subtle cutting motion across her throat, a warning. Later that night, Denise slipped me a note during dinner. It read, "Be careful. Nina found something. Room 237 storage cabinet, top shelf." I spent 3 days figuring out how to access room 237, which turned out to be a medical supply room. I finally got my chance when a fire alarm went off, which I later learned Eli had arranged by calling in a fake emergency from outside. In the confusion, I slipped away and used the master key I'd stolen from Roy's cart. The storage room was dimly lit. I climbed on a chair and reached for the top shelf of the cabinet. My fingers found a folder taped to the back. Inside was a half-completed incident report. Nina had filed a complaint against Ethan 3 days before her disappearance, alleging he'd touched her inappropriately while she was sedated. The report was marked, "Patient hallucination. No action required," and signed by the head nurse. I took pictures with the small disposable camera Eli had smuggled in during a visit, then returned everything exactly as I'd found it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the folder. That night, I lay awake planning my next move. I now had evidence of a complaint, but it wasn't enough. I needed to catch Ethan somehow, to find concrete proof of what he'd done to Nina and possibly other patients. I didn't realize I was crying until Greta whispered from her bed, "They hurt your sister, didn't they?" I turned to look at my roommate, surprised. "What do you know about it?" "The walls have ears," she said cryptically. "But sometimes the ears have mouths too." The next morning, I woke up determined to get Greta to tell me more, but she was gone. Her bed was made, and all her cat pictures were missing from the wall. I asked the morning nurse where she went. "Greta? She was transferred to another facility overnight," the nurse said without looking up from her clipboard. "Doctor's orders." That was weird. Greta seemed fine yesterday. I couldn't shake the feeling that her transfer had something to do with our conversation. I headed to breakfast with a knot in my stomach. The cafeteria was buzzing with the usual morning chaos, but I noticed Ethan watching me from the medication station. When our eyes met, he smiled and waved me over. "Morning, Chloe. Sleep well?" he asked, handing me a little paper cup with pills. "Not really," I admitted, taking the cup. My roommate disappeared. "Ah, yes. Greta needed specialized care," he said smoothly. "These things happen suddenly sometimes." I nodded and pretended to swallow the pills, but tucked them under my tongue instead. Something felt off about the whole situation. As I turned to leave, Ethan grabbed my wrist. "You know, if you're feeling lonely, I could arrange for you to have a private room, he said, his voice low. Some patients do better without roommates. I forced a grateful smile. That's really nice of you. His grip lingered a second too long before he released me. I walked away feeling his eyes on my back. In the bathroom, I spit the pills into the toilet and flushed. I needed to stay alert. During group therapy, I noticed a new face, a temp nurse named Valerie who was filling in for someone on maternity leave. She seemed different from the other staff, actually listening to patients instead of just going through the motions. After the session, I approached her. Hi, I'm Chloe, I said. Are you new here? Just temporary, she replied with a genuine smile. I'm agency staff, filling in for a few weeks. Perfect. Someone not entrenched in the Whitestone system might be more willing to talk. I made a mental note to build a connection with her. That afternoon, I called Eli again. My roommate disappeared right after hinting she knew something about Nina. I whispered into the phone. And I found a buried complaint Nina filed against Ethan. Jesus, Eli muttered. I've been digging too. This Ethan guy has worked at 3 different facilities in 5 years. Keeps moving around. Red flag, I said. Huge one, Eli agreed. Listen, I'm going to try to track down former patients or staff from those places. And I got you something to help. Check under the vending machine next time you're in the visitor area. After we hung up, I casually wandered to the vending machine and pretended to tie my shoe. Taped underneath was a small digital voice recorder, no bigger than a thumb drive. I palmed it and slipped it into my sock. That night, Ethan was working the late shift. Around 11 p.m., he came to check on me in my now private room. I had the recorder hidden under my pillow, already running. Just checking in, he said, sitting on the edge of my bed uninvited. How are you adjusting to being alone? It's okay, I said, trying to sound vulnerable. I keep thinking about my sister, though. That's natural, he said, placing his hand on my blanket-covered knee. Nina talked about you a lot, you know. My heart pounded. She did? Oh, yes. She was very concerned about you, actually. Thought you resented having to take care of her. I swallowed hard. He was trying to manipulate me, make me feel guilty. I loved my sister. Of course you did, he said, patting my leg. But caregiving is such a burden. That's why places like Whitestone exist, to take that burden from families. Did you take care of Nina a lot? I asked, trying to get him talking. I was her favorite, he said with a smile that made my skin crawl. She trusted me. I could calm her down when she got agitated. How did you do that? I pressed. His eyes flickered with something dark. I have my ways, special techniques. He stood up suddenly. You should get some sleep. I'll check on you later. After he left, I retrieved the recorder and hid it in a new spot. His words weren't a confession, but the creepy implications were all there. I needed more. The next day, I sought out Trevor again. This time, I cornered him in the art room where we had more privacy. Please, I begged. I know something happened to Nina. I need to know. Trevor looked around nervously before leaning in. Your sister was getting better, for real. Then she started saying Ethan was coming into her room at night. Said he'd sit on her bed and touch her hair while she pretended to be asleep. My blood ran cold. Did anyone believe her? The new nurse did. Melissa. She filed something. Next day, Melissa was gone and Nina was on new meds that made her super out of it. And then she supposedly checked herself out. I finished. Trevor nodded grimly. Nina was terrified of leaving. She told me the day before she disappeared that she felt safe here, except for him. I thanked Trevor and immediately started looking for this Melissa person. But nobody seemed to know where she went or even remember her last name. During lunch, I sat with Denise and casually brought up the missing nurse. Oh, Melissa Kwan, Denise said between bites of bland casserole. She was only here for like 2 weeks. Super nice. Actually treated us like people. Do you know where she went? I asked. Denise shrugged. Heard she got a job at County General. Ethan was mad when she left. I overheard him talking to Dr. Winters about her being unprofessional and buying into patient delusions. This was the lead I needed. I had to get a message to Eli about finding Melissa Kwan. That evening, Valerie the temp nurse was supervising medication time. When it was my turn, I palmed my pills again and whispered, "Can I talk to you privately? It's important." She looked surprised but nodded. I'll come by during rounds. True to her word, Valerie stopped by my room an hour later. I took a risk and decided to be partially honest. My sister Nina was a patient here, I said quietly. She died right after leaving this place. I think something happened to her here, and I'm trying to find out what. Valerie's expression turned serious. That's why you admitted yourself? To investigate? I nodded, watching her face carefully for her reaction. She sighed. Look, I've only been here 2 weeks, but something feels off about this place. The way some staff talk about patients when they think no one's listening. Have you heard anything about a nurse named Ethan? I asked. Her expression darkened. He's overly familiar with female patients. I've reported it to my agency, but without concrete evidence, there's not much they can do. Would you be willing to help me? I asked. Valerie hesitated. I could lose my license. My sister lost her life, I countered. After a long pause, she nodded. What do you need? Information on a former nurse named Melissa Kwan, and maybe access to the medication logs from when my sister was here. I'll see what I can do, Valerie said. But be careful, especially around Ethan. He's got the administration wrapped around his finger. The next day, Ethan sought me out during recreation time. He sat next to me at the puzzle table, his leg pressing against mine. You're making good progress here, Chloe, he said. Dr. Winters is impressed with your participation. Thanks, I mumbled, trying to edge away subtly. You know, he continued, I could recommend you for our outpatient program soon. Get you out of here faster. I looked up, surprised. Really? Of course, he smiled. I have a lot of influence here. I like to help special patients. His hand brushed against mine as he placed a puzzle piece. We could discuss it during my night shift, when it's quieter. The implication was clear. I forced myself to smile back. That would be great. As soon as he left, I felt sick to my stomach. But I had to play along to get evidence. I activated the voice recorder and slipped it into my pocket before dinner. That night, Ethan came to my room as promised. I sat up in bed, trying to look eager but nervous. So, about that outpatient program, I started. Yes, he said, sitting closer than necessary. You remind me so much of Nina. She was special too. You mentioned that before, I said carefully. What was special about her? His eyes took on a distant look. She needed protection, guidance. Some patients just need a firmer hand. Did she ever cause problems? I asked. His expression hardened slightly. She got confused sometimes, started making up stories. What kind of stories? Nothing important, he said dismissively. The point is, I could help you, like I helped her. And how exactly did you help her? I pressed. He smiled and reached out to touch my hair. I made her feel safe, comfortable. His hand trailed down to my shoulder. Sometimes I'd sit with her at night when she couldn't sleep. I fought the urge to recoil. That's very dedicated of you. I'm a dedicated person, Chloe, he said, his hand now resting on my upper arm. I go above and beyond for patients I care about. I needed to push him further. Nina mentioned a nurse who was mean to her. Melissa something? His face changed instantly. Melissa was incompetent, believed everything patients told her, no matter how delusional. What did Nina tell her? I asked innocently. Ethan's grip on my arm tightened painfully. Confused things. She wasn't well. You're hurting me, I said quietly. He immediately released me, his charming mask sliding back into place. Sorry, I just get frustrated when I think about how some staff can harm patient progress by validating delusions. Of course, I nodded, rubbing my arm. So, about that outpatient program, let's talk more tomorrow, he said, standing up. Think about what kind of appreciation you might show for my help. After he left, I retrieved the recorder, hands shaking. It wasn't a confession, but his behavior was damning. I just needed more. The next morning, Valerie slipped me a note during medication. It had an address and phone number for Melissa Kwan, along with a brief message. Medication logs show Nina was given double doses of sedatives the week before she left. Not doctor ordered. Ethan signed them out. I needed to get this information to Eli. During my next phone call, I gave him Melissa's contact info and told him about the medication logs. I'm on it, Eli promised. I've also been tracking Ethan's online presence. Found some old Reddit accounts that might be him, based on details matching his background. Username Night Shift Hero, posts about managing difficult patients, and some really creepy stuff about special connections with women who need guidance. Can you print those out? I asked. Already did. I'm building a file. But Chloe, I'm worried about you in there with him. I'm being careful, I assured him, but I need more evidence. I'm meeting Melissa tomorrow, Eli said. She agreed to talk. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Nina in the same building, being drugged and manipulated by Ethan. The rage I felt was overwhelming. I had to channel it into my plan. The next day during group therapy, I deliberately shared more about my feelings of abandonment and need for validation, knowing Ethan was observing from the doorway. I was painting myself as his perfect target. It worked. He approached me afterward, suggesting we have a private session to discuss my issues. That would be really helpful, I said, looking up at him with feigned admiration. Tonight, he said. After lights out, I'll come get you. I nodded, heart racing. This was my chance to get something concrete on tape. I spent the day preparing. I positioned the recorder carefully in my robe pocket and practiced looking vulnerable yet receptive. When lights out came, I waited anxiously. Sure enough, around 11:30 p.m., Ethan appeared at my door. Ready for our session? He asked quietly. I nodded and followed him down the hall to a small office. He closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit on a small couch while he took the chair opposite. So, Chloe, he began, his voice soft, tell me more about these feelings of abandonment. I launched into a prepared story about feeling unwanted and seeking validation from men, all fabricated, but designed to appeal to his predatory nature. That's very common, he said, moving to sit beside me on the couch. Many women seek approval in unhealthy ways. Like Nina? I asked innocently. His expression flickered. Your sister had similar issues, yes. Did she look for your approval too? He smiled slightly. Nina was very attached to me. She trusted me completely. What happened to her, Ethan? I asked directly. The real story. His face hardened. She left. Signed herself out. Whatever happened after that had nothing to do with Whitestone. But she filed a complaint against you, I said, watching his reaction carefully. Nurse Kwan helped her. His eyes narrowed dangerously. Who told you that? Nina told me. I lied. Before she disappeared. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Nina was schizophrenic, Chloe. She had delusions. About you coming into her room at night? About you touching her while she was sedated? His hand shot out, gripping my wrist painfully. Be very careful what you say next. I didn't back down. I know what you did to her. You don't know anything, he hissed. And neither did that stupid nurse. Nina was confused, hallucinating. So why did she end up dead right after leaving here? I challenged. His grip tightened further. Some patients can't handle the outside world. They make bad choices. Like what? Fighting back against you? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Your sister was troubled. I tried to help her. Sometimes patients misinterpret care as something else. Is that what you tell yourself? I asked. He released my wrist suddenly and stood up. I think we're done here. You clearly have some delusions of your own to work through. Just like Nina? I pressed. He smiled coldly. You know, you really are like your sister. Same defiance, same inability to recognize help when it's offered. What happened the night she left, Ethan? She signed herself out, he said flatly. End of story. I don't believe you. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. Doesn't matter what you believe. No one will listen to you. You're a mental patient, remember? Just like Nina was. With that, he opened the door. Back to your room. Now. I walked out, my heart pounding but feeling triumphant. I had his threatening behavior and damning statements on tape. The next morning, Valerie found me during breakfast. Be careful, she whispered. Ethan was just in the nurse's station reviewing your file and adding notes. What kind of notes? I asked. Paranoid ideation, fixation on staff, possible delusional thinking about sister's death. My blood ran cold. He was setting me up, creating a record that would discredit anything I said about him. During my next call with Eli, I updated him on the situation. I met with Melissa, he said. She confirmed everything. Nina filed a formal complaint about Ethan making inappropriate advances and touching her during night checks. The next day, The head nurse told Melissa the complaint was dismissed as a delusion. When Melissa protested, she was fired. Did she keep any records? I asked hopefully. Better. She kept a copy of Nina's complaint and her own termination letter citing validation of patient delusions as the reason. That's huge, I breathed. What about the Reddit stuff? Definitely him, Eli confirmed. Found posts where he talks about working at Whitestone and managing difficult female patients. Some really disturbing stuff about how mental patients crave structure and physical guidance. I got him on tape last night basically threatening me and dismissing Nina's complaints as delusions, I said. But he's documenting me as paranoid in my file. We need to move faster, Eli said urgently. I don't like you being in there with him knowing you're onto him. One more day, I promised. I need one more piece of evidence. That afternoon, I approached Trevor again. Did Nina ever mention where she kept her personal journal? I asked. Trevor looked surprised. Yeah, actually. She had this loose vent in her room where she hid stuff. Room 118. I thanked him and immediately requested to change rooms, claiming mine had a draft. It took some convincing, but by evening, I was moved to room 118, Nina's old room. Once alone, I examined every vent until I found one with slightly bent edges. I pried it open and reached inside. My fingers touched something solid, a notebook bound with a hair tie. Nina's journal. I flipped through it with shaking hands. The early entries showed her progress, her hope for recovery. Then about 2 months in, the tone changed. Ethan came in again last night, pretended he was just checking on me, touched my hair for a long time. I pretended to be asleep. A few pages later, told Dr. Winters about Ethan. He said it was just normal night checks and I was misinterpreting because of my condition. Am I crazy? And then, most damning of all, dated 3 days before she disappeared. Ethan gave me extra meds tonight, said doctor ordered it. Made me so sleepy. Woke up with my gown unbuttoned. He was sitting on my bed. When I asked what he was doing, he said I had been having a night terror and he was calming me down. I know what happened. No one believes me. Melissa tried to help, but now she's gone. I need to get out of here. The final entry sent chills down my spine. Ethan says if I tell anyone else about him, he'll make sure I never leave. Says he'll have me transferred to the secure ward where no one will hear me. I'm going to try to sign myself out tomorrow. Chloe will help me. But she never got the chance to call me, because something happened that night. I hid the journal in my pillowcase and tried to sleep, but my mind was racing. I had enough now. The incident report, Melissa's testimony, the Reddit posts, my recording, and now Nina's journal. I just needed to get it all out of here. Around 2 a.m., my door opened. Ethan stood there, his silhouette menacing in the darkness. Can't sleep? He asked, stepping inside and closing the door. I sat up, instantly alert, just restless. He moved closer. I've been reviewing your case, Chloe. Your symptoms are concerning. Paranoia, fixation on conspiracy theories about your sister. I'm not paranoid, I said firmly. That's exactly what someone with paranoia would say, he replied with a cold smile. I've recommended a medication adjustment, starting tonight. He produced a syringe from his pocket, just a mild sedative to help you rest. I backed up against the wall. I don't want that. It's not optional, he said, advancing. Doctor's orders. Which doctor? I challenged, because I'd like to speak to them first. His smile disappeared. You know, you're becoming a problem patient, just like Nina was. What did you do to her? I demanded. He lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my arm. Nothing she didn't ask for with her behavior. I struggled against his grip. She was getting better. She was going to leave. She wasn't ready, he hissed. She needed more treatment, more guidance. You mean more abuse? I spat, his face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little... He raised the syringe. I reacted instinctively, kicking out hard. My foot connected with his knee, and he stumbled backward with a grunt of pain. The syringe clattered to the floor. I lunged for the door, but he recovered quickly, grabbing my hair and yanking me back. You're not going anywhere, he growled. Help! I screamed. Someone help me! His hand clamped over my mouth. No one's coming. Night staff is on break. Just you and me, Chloe. I bit down hard on his hand. He yelped and loosened his grip enough for me to break free. I scrambled toward the door again. Stop right there, came a new voice. Valerie stood in the doorway, a security guard behind her. Ethan immediately stepped back, his demeanor changing instantly. Thank goodness you're here. Patient became aggressive, delusional. I was attempting to administer prescribed sedation. Really? Valerie said coolly. Because I've been standing here for the past minute and that's not what I saw or heard. The security guard looked confused. What's going on? This nurse was attempting to forcibly sedate a patient against her will, Valerie stated firmly. And based on what I heard, this isn't the first time. Ethan's face darkened. You're making a serious mistake. This patient is experiencing a psychotic episode, just like her sister did. My sister's journal, I gasped, pulling it from my pillowcase. It's all in here. What he did to her. What he was planning to do to me. The security guard took the journal cautiously. This is ridiculous, Ethan scoffed. She could have written that herself. She's delusional, fixated on her sister's death. Then explain this, I said, pulling out the voice recorder, and the incident report Nina filed, and the testimony from Nurse Kwan. Ethan's confident expression faltered. You're bluffing. My boyfriend has copies of everything, I said, including your Reddit posts as night shift hero. The color drained from his face. I think we need to call the administrator on call, Valerie said to the security guard, and the police. This is absurd, Ethan sputtered. You can't possibly believe a mental patient over a staff member. Actually, came another voice from the hallway. I believe her completely. Dr. Winters stepped into view, looking grave. I received some disturbing evidence from a Mr. Eli Parker earlier today. I've been reviewing security footage and medication logs all evening. Ethan's expression turned desperate. Richard, you know me. We've worked together for years. Yes, Dr. Winters said coldly, which makes this betrayal of trust even worse. The security guard moved toward Ethan. Sir, I need you to come with me. Ethan looked around wildly, then suddenly lunged at me again. This is your fault, he screamed. The guard guard intercepted him, tackling him to the ground. Valerie pulled me safely into the hallway as Ethan was restrained, still shouting threats and accusations. As they led him away, I sank to the floor, exhausted but triumphant. I had done it. For Nina, I had exposed the truth. The next morning, Dr. Winters called me to his office. The police have arrested Ethan Markowitz, he informed me. They found evidence on his phone connecting him to several incidents of patient abuse. And Nina? I asked, my voice breaking. Dr. Winters looked down. The investigation is ongoing, but based on the medication logs and his access card usage the night she disappeared, there's strong evidence he helped her leave the facility against protocol, possibly to silence her complaints. He called her, I said flatly. We don't know that for certain, Dr. Winters said carefully, but the police are treating it as a suspicious death now, not a sewer slide. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. What happens now? You're free to leave, of course, he said. Your admission was voluntary, but I want to apologize personally for what happened to your sister under our care. We failed her terribly. I stood up, suddenly eager to get out of this place. Yes, you did, and no apology will bring her back. As I walked out of his office, I felt a strange mix of vindication and emptiness. I had gotten justice for Nina, exposed a predator, and possibly saved other vulnerable women from his abuse, but my sister was still gone. Eli was waiting for me at the front entrance, his face lighting up when he saw me. He wrapped me in a tight hug. You did it, he whispered. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected, holding him close. I couldn't have done this without you. As we walked to his car, I looked back at Whitestone one last time. Nina can rest now, I said quietly. Eli squeezed my hand. And what about you? Can you rest now too? I thought about it for a moment. Not yet, but soon. The investigation into Nina's death continued for months. They found Ethan's DNA under her fingernails, proving there had been a struggle. Security footage showed him escorting her out a side entrance the night she disappeared. His phone had her location pinged near the drainage ditch where she was found. It wasn't enough for a murder conviction, but it was enough for justice. Ethan went to prison for patient abuse, medical fraud, and criminal negligence leading to death. The hospital faced massive fines and restructuring. As for me, I finally went back to school, started studying psychology, ironically enough. I wanted to understand what had happened to Nina better, and maybe help others like her someday. I started my psychology program that fall, but I couldn't focus on my studies. The trial was coming up, and I kept having nightmares about Nina. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her in that drainage ditch. I'd wake up sweating, heart racing, unable to breathe. Eli was worried about me. He kept suggesting therapy, but I brushed him off. I didn't need therapy. I needed Ethan to pay. The weeks leading up to the trial were a blur. I spent most of my time helping the prosecutor prepare. I handed over all the evidence we'd collected: Nina's journal, the voice recordings, the medication logs Valerie had copied. The prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Janet, told me they had a strong case. Ethan was facing multiple charges: patient abuse, medical fraud, criminal negligence, and sexual assault of vulnerable persons. What about murder? I asked during one of our prep sessions. He called my sister. Janet sighed and explained they couldn't prove it beyond reasonable doubt. The evidence was circumstantial. His DNA under Nina's fingernails, the security footage of him escorting her out, his phone pinging near the ditch. It all pointed to him, but it wasn't enough for a murder conviction. We go with what we can prove, she told me. Trust me, he's going away for a long time. I wasn't satisfied, but I had to accept it. The day before the trial, I visited Nina's grave. I hadn't been there since the funeral. The headstone was simple, just her name, dates, and beloved sister. I sat on the grass and told her everything that had happened since she died, how I'd gone undercover at Whitestone, how we'd caught Ethan, how he was going to pay for what he did to her. I miss you, I whispered, tracing her name with my finger. I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. The first day of the trial was surreal. Seeing Ethan in his orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, was both satisfying and infuriating. He looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than he had at Whitestone. When our eyes met across the courtroom, he quickly looked away. Good, he should be afraid. I testified on the second day. I told the court everything: how Nina had been improving, how she'd suddenly disappeared, how I'd admitted myself to investigate. I described Ethan's behavior, his threats, his attempt to forcibly sedate me. The defense tried to paint me as unstable, grief-stricken, imagining conspiracies, but the evidence backed me up. Melissa Kwan's testimony was devastating for Ethan. She described in detail how Nina had come to her, terrified, reporting that Ethan had touched her inappropriately while she was sedated. She explained how she'd filed the complaint, only to be fired the next day for validating patient delusions. The defense couldn't shake her story. Valerie's testimony about what she'd witnessed that night was equally damning. She described finding Ethan in my room, attempting to inject me with an unauthorized sedative, threatening me. The security footage from the hallway corroborated her account. Dr. Winters testified too, looking uncomfortable and defensive. He admitted the hospital had failed in its duty of care. He confirmed that the medication logs showed Nina had been given unauthorized doses of sedatives in the days before her disappearance. He acknowledged that Ethan had been the one to administer them. The most powerful evidence was Nina's journal. Hearing her words read aloud in court broke something inside me. Her fear, her confusion, her desperate attempts to be believed, it was all there in her handwriting. The jury couldn't look away from that. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I attended every day, sitting in the front row, staring at Ethan. I wanted him to feel my presence, to know I wasn't going away. Sometimes he would glance at me, then quickly look down. Other times, he would stare back defiantly. Those were the moments I had to dig my nails into my palms to keep from screaming. When the verdict came in, I was holding Eli's hand so tight my knuckles were white, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Ethan to 25 years, not for murder, but for everything else. It wasn't enough, but it was something. After the sentencing, Janet told me Whitestone was facing massive fines and restructuring. Several administrators had been fired, including Dr. Winters. The hospital was being investigated by the state licensing board. Small comfort, but at least they wouldn't hurt anyone else. I thought I'd feel better after the trial. I thought getting justice for Nina would help me move on, but I still felt hollow, empty. like I was just going through the motions of living. Eli noticed. Of course he did. He was always so attentive, so caring. One night, about a month after the trial, he sat me down in our apartment. "Chloe, I'm worried about you," he said, taking my hands. "You're not sleeping. You're barely eating. You dropped out of your classes." I shrugged. "I'm fine, just tired." "You're not fine," he insisted. "You need help. Professional help." I pulled my hands away. "I don't need a shrink. I'm not crazy." "I never said you were," Eli replied patiently. "But you've been through a trauma, multiple traumas, losing Nina, what happened at Whitestone, the trial. It's a lot for anyone to handle." I knew he was right, but I couldn't admit it. The thought of talking to a therapist, of being vulnerable like that, terrified me. What if they didn't believe me? What if they thought I was paranoid, just like Ethan had claimed? "I'll think about it," I said, just to end the conversation. But Eli wasn't letting it go. The next day, he came home with a business card. "Dr. Amara Singh, trauma specialist. Just one session," he pleaded. "If you hate it, you never have to go back." I agreed, mostly to shut him up. I went to the appointment expecting to sit in silence for an hour. Instead, I found myself talking, and talking, and talking. Dr. Singh just listened, nodding occasionally, asking gentle questions. By the end of the session, my throat was raw from crying. "Same time next week?" she asked as I was leaving. I nodded. I went back the next week, and the week after that. Slowly, painfully, I started to process everything that had happened. The guilt I felt for not being there when Nina needed me. The anger at my parents for abandoning us. The trauma of finding Nina's body. The fear I'd experienced at Whitestone. Dr. Singh helped me understand that I wasn't responsible for Nina's death, that I'd done everything I could for her, that I deserved to live my own life, to be happy. 6 months after the trial, I felt ready to move forward. I re-enrolled in school, this time in social work instead of psychology. I wanted to help people like Nina, to advocate for those who couldn't advocate for themselves. My parents tried to contact me around this time. They'd heard about the trial on the news and suddenly wanted to reconnect. I ignored their calls. I wasn't ready to forgive them for abandoning Nina and me when we needed them most. Maybe someday, but not yet. Eli and I moved to a bigger apartment, one with a spare bedroom that I set up as an office for my studies. We adopted a cat from the shelter and named her Nina. It felt right somehow, having a Nina in our home again. A year after the trial, I got a call from Janet. She wanted to let me know that Whitestone had been shut down permanently. The state had revoked their license after finding numerous other violations during their investigation. The building was being converted into affordable housing. "Thought you'd want to know," Janet said. "It's over. Really over." I thanked her and hung up. I sat on our couch, petting Nina Cat, thinking about everything that had happened. About my sister, about Whitestone, about Ethan. For the first time, I felt a sense of closure. Not happiness exactly, but peace, like I could finally breathe again. That weekend, Eli and I visited Nina's grave. I brought fresh flowers and a small stone angel I'd found at a flea market. It reminded me of the ceramic angel Nina had kept on her nightstand as a kid. "I miss you," I told her as I arranged the flowers. "I think about you every day, but I'm doing okay now. I'm helping people, like you always wanted to do." Eli squeezed my shoulder. "She'd be proud of you," he said softly. I nodded, wiping away tears. "I know." On our way home, we stopped for coffee at a small cafe. As we waited for our order, I noticed a young woman at a corner table, talking animatedly to someone who wasn't there. The barista called out her name, "Order for Zoe," but she didn't respond, lost in her conversation. The barista called again, louder this time. "Zoe, your latte." The woman jumped, looking startled. She got up hesitantly, glancing back at her empty table as if asking permission to leave. As she approached the counter, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. Without thinking, I walked over to her. "Hi," I said gently. "I'm Chloe. Would you like to join my boyfriend and me? We have an extra chair." She looked surprised, then suspicious. "Why?" "No reason," I shrugged. "Just thought you might like some company." Zoe studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, thanks." We spent the next hour talking. Zoe was 22, recently diagnosed with schizophrenia. She'd dropped out of college and was living with her brother, who was trying his best, but didn't really understand what she was going through. She was scared, confused, feeling like her life was over before it had really begun. I told her about Nina. Not everything, not the dark parts, but about how brilliant and funny she was, how her diagnosis hadn't defined her, how she'd been getting better with the right treatment. "It's not a death sentence," I told Zoe. "It's just a different path." Before we left, I gave her my number. "Text me anytime," I said, "even if you just need someone to listen." 3 days later, she texted me. We met for coffee again, then again the following week. Soon, it became a regular thing. I introduced her to a support group I'd found during my research for school. I helped her apply for disability benefits. I listened when she needed to talk. Eli teased me about adopting strays, but I could tell he was proud. "You're good at this," he said one night as we were getting ready for bed. "Helping people. It's like you were born for it." I thought about that as I drifted off to sleep. Maybe he was right. Maybe all the pain and loss I'd experienced had led me here, to this purpose. Maybe that was Nina's final gift to me. 2 years after Nina's death, I graduated with my social work degree. Eli proposed the same day, getting down on one knee right after the ceremony. I said yes, of course. We set the date for the following spring. I started working at a community mental health center, specializing in cases involving young adults with severe mental illness. It was challenging work, often heartbreaking, but deeply fulfilling. Every client I helped felt like a tribute to Nina. Zoe was doing well. She'd started a part-time job at a bookstore and was taking classes at community college. She still had bad days, still heard voices sometimes, but she was managing. She'd become like a little sister to me. On the 3rd anniversary of Nina's death, I visited her grave alone. I sat on the grass and told her about my job, about Eli, about our upcoming wedding. I told her about Zoe and the other clients I was helping. I told her I was happy, truly happy, for the first time in years. "I wish you were here," I said, touching the cool stone of her headstone. "I wish you could see all of this, but I know you'd be proud. I know you'd understand." As I was leaving the cemetery, my phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Bad day. Voices won't stop. Can we talk?" I called her immediately, walking to my car. "I'm on my way," I told her. "Just hang on. "You're not alone." And in that moment, I felt Nina with me, guiding me, not as a ghost or a spirit, but as a part of me, the part that knew what it meant to suffer, to struggle, to need someone who understood, the part that knew how to help. I started the car and headed toward Zoe's apartment, Nina's voice echoing in my mind. "Thank you for taking care of me." Now I was taking care of others in her name. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a good life, a meaningful life. And that, I realized, was the best revenge of all.